Hello and welcome to Nigeria Decides, the program that brings you news on what is shaping up to be one of the most exciting election battles in Nigeria's history. We'll be discussing these topical issues with a panel of experts in the run-up to the elections. There are tough choices to make in 2019, so we'll try to help you decide on Nigeria Decides. Welcome to Nigeria Decides. I'm Priscilla Winkbo. On this week's panel are political analyst and business developer Bola Oba, the broadcast journalist Lokwe Banjo, and commentator and anti-corruption campaigner Kayode Ogundamisi. And later in the program, we'll be live from Lagos with Suleiman Alede. Earlier this week, Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari addressed the 73rd United Nations General Assembly in New York. He drew attention to some of the issues threatening global peace and the effect of climate change on security in West Africa, and spoke warmly of the passing of the former United Nations General Secretary, Kofi Annan. Let's take a look.
Irregular migration is not a consequence of conflicts alone, but of the effects of climate change and lack of opportunities at home. Climate change remains one of the greatest challenges of our time. Very close to us at home, it is our lot in Nigeria, together with our neighbors around the Chad Basin, to live with the climate change consequences of a drastically shrunk Lake Chad, and the parching up of otherwise fertile arable land. The lake was a major source of livelihood to more than 45 million inhabitants of the region. Its shrinking meant less of livelihoods, and they are now rendered poor and vulnerable to the activities of extremists and terrorist groups. Corruption within countries and illicit flow of funds across national boundaries have huge negative impact on the stability, peace, and economic prospect of millions in developing countries. Corruption significantly drives national governments of resources to provide meaningful livelihoods to their populations, who are predominantly youth, thus giving rise to more irregular migration.
Well, let me come to you first. Was there any aspect of that speech that stood out for you in particular?
To be very honest with you, and to be very polite to my president, not much.
Oh, okay. Nice and short.
The speech was the best for me, platitudinal.
Okay.
These are the things heads of government do annually anyway. They go to the Yakia convention to go talk. But
Yakia convention.
That's what
I thought it was the UN General Assembly. Look, what did you think? He made several points, spoke a great deal about global peace. And the threats that is facing, not just Africa, but the rest of the world. Was there any aspect of the speech that you thought this aspect really stood out for me?
I mean, unfortunately, I think I'm with my brother Bola on this one, because I think it was just, in the nicest way possible, a lot of lip service. Essentially, every aspect that he covered, from migration, humanitarian crisis, insurgency, were all areas that he could have explained in more detail the involvement of Nigeria and how Nigeria can learn from that. But that wasn't covered. He didn't even look at the crowd. There was no kind of engagement there. But for me, there could have been more. There could have been more depth. He could have unpacked it a little bit more. But for me, it was purely lip service, unfortunately.
Kayode, and I know, in particular, you're very much you campaign a great deal for this president and so on. But
I did too, I must confess.
Okay. So at this point, this is not his first visit to the UN. What did you think of this?
I think the first thing, we didn't have a president that was laughed at by members of the United Nations, like Donald Trump in the US. And secondly, it's easy for us to sit here in the studios if you've not been to that region and not appreciate the fact that he's highlighted the impact the global warming has had on northern Nigeria. if you've been to the Chad Basin area and you see the dry land and you see women and children who either would fish and use that as their main means of livelihood, and they can't do that anymore. And you see how Boko Haram is taking advantage of that to destroy that region, then you would appreciate that the platform of the UN is where leaders would come and highlight what is going on. In terms of what he will do, the UN is not a campaign platform where you would tell people this is how I'm going to treat it.
But what did you think about what he had to say? I mean, it's fair enough, you know, that's what's happening in the region and so on. But what did you make of? Was there any aspect of what he said that really stood out?
I think that's probably like a three minutes cut from a speech that lasted more than 30 minutes. The major area he highlighted for me, apart from those areas that affect Nigeria, is the position of Nigeria on the two-state solution in Palestine, how it affects us as a country.
Okay.
And that's quite important, that we're taking a very important role in international politics and identifying the sufferings of the people of Palestine.
What about the fact, bear with me just a second, you know, he made mention of the fact that climate change somehow has an effect, you know, it's what is causing irregular migration. How likely is that?
That's true.
One of the factors. One of the factors was not really the factor, to be honest. Let me quickly take on what Kayode said before I go to. Governments should be visionary.
Right.
The receding effect of the Lake Chad has been on for almost 60 years now. Indeed, from the independence of Nigeria to where we are now, the Lake Chad has receded for more than 70%. More than 70% of its size. Now, you would wonder that any visionary government should be engaging other methodologies or mechanisms to make sure that the lives of people are improved in that area. Skills, empowerment.
Okay. Time doesn't permit me to sort of allow you to continue, but very quickly, as you know, at the beginning you said, yes, it had an impact. So if you're now saying that this issue has been going on for, 60 years, so what is the new impact that climate change is having on migration?
That is the very reason why it should be perturbing to anybody who is watching any government that is just basically now playing a platitudinal this thing to it, when ordinarily other strategic measures could be taken to improve the quality of lives of the people. Come to think of it, before you campaigned to be president, this phenomenon has been on. You are the president now. What in specific terms are you doing to attend to the improvement of the quality of lives of the people? The best our president said on that platform was to beg the international community.
Okay, look, but let me hear what, I personally, listening to that, I thought, interesting. What did you think?
I mean, on the topic of climate change, I think there are other structural issues there that haven't been addressed, especially, the issues of dams. We have bad dams, we have bad drainage systems. Even in the Niger area, these floods have been happening. We know that rainy season comes for months and months every time. Why hasn't there been any kind of forward-thinking implementation that is there to solve these problems? I mean, even this year alone, hundreds of people have died from flooding alone in Niger State.
He also, thank you for that, he also made mention of the fact, the negative impact of corruption. This was obviously one of his areas of campaign, and he speaks about the fact that it's causing the economic impact of that, instability and lack of peace. Kayode, very quickly, how well do you think that indeed corruption is having an impact along the lines of what he said?
A very huge impact, because those funds you think you need to invest on people to be able to live well within those areas where climate change is affecting them, the money has been taken away, probably invested in countries like the UK. But simple geography will also tell us that the Chad area is not just restricted to Nigeria. It cuts across about 3 or 4 countries. So it's not just the responsibility of the Nigerian government. It's a visionary that's West Africa, the whole of Africa.
He did call on ECOWAS too.
And to call on them to do something now, if they've not been doing something, I think it's a step in the right direction. I think we also need to know that there's this Chad Basin Development Commission that has been formed by West African leaders. So something is being done. It's not good enough. It's not well enough. But it's not an issue. It's not an issue that's going to just go away
just like that. Well, Lokwe, did you think that, we've been talking about corruption for quite a long time. Is it something that we can just sort of bottle hole and say because of corruption, we don't have peace, we're not having, we're having the kind of situation or problems that we're having now? Because just like the Lake Chad situation, it's not new.
I think on the issue of corruption, I think in fairness to President Muhammadu Buhari, this is something that's been endemic for a very long time that cuts across several administrations. So one administration trying to solve the issue of corruption, I know it's something that's very dear to his heart. I don't think he has enough time to do that yet. And what really needs to happen is that there needs to be a foundation that's created in not just the Buhari administration, the next administration and administrations after that to solve this issue. It's a collective problem. I don't think one person can completely solve the issue of corruption in Nigeria.
We're going to come back to that. We're going to take a quick break now. We have a lot more to discuss, so please join us in a few moments. Hello and welcome back to Nigeria Decides. I'm Priscilla Nwikpo, and I'm pleased to welcome back our panel. The political analyst and business developer, Bola Oba, broadcast journalist, Lakwe Banjo, and the commentator and anti-corruption campaigner, Kayode Ogundamisi. Welcome back to you all. Now, issues were raised this week over vote buying during the initial Osun State governorship election, following an inconclusive result. The Electoral Commission, known as INEC, and the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, issued a joint statement stating that, and I quote, "Vote buyers and their potential customers run the real risk of being arrested and prosecuted." Acting EFCC Chair Ibrahim Magu shared INEC's worries, saying, "There's indeed a lot of concern about vote buying and selling. There's also a lot of concern about the possibility of money bags trying to derail our democracy and democratic process." So my question is, do we have an issue with vote buying in Nigeria? And why is it still possible, despite the laws and threat of persecution in Nigeria? Prosecution, I should say. Bola, let me come back to you, first of all, on this issue of vote buying. Is it a real problem that we should concern ourselves with?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, because when you're dealing with people who are materially, intellectually, and soulishly poor, they sell cheap.
Right.
And to be honest with you, in that polity as a whole, the quality of the politicals we have is a bit patronizing, to say the least. So that's one. Two is that if you look at the provision of the Electoral Act, indeed, how government policies is articulated around the elections is also can also constitute into vote buying.
Right.
The vice president went to Osogbo. A program in his office, the National Social Investment Program, the trader money, they were dispensing around the time of the election. They were dispensing monies to traders. And for God's sake, if you look at the Electoral Act, that provision in the Electoral Act and that act, so it's not only the sordid one that we see on balloting day,
but it's the political class. So look, well, let me ask you this. Bola has just described the situation. The law says one thing, and we see those who are, acting contrary to the law. But my question is, why is there a failure with the judiciary, for instance? When INEC has stated that indeed there is an issue, and of course electoral watchers are also saying the same thing, but nothing is done.
I mean, it's not fair to say that nothing's been done. I mean, there have been arrests made and prosecutions are ongoing at the moment, especially for INEC officials that are engaging.
Was this as a result of the Ekiti election?
Ekiti was a lot more vast. I mean, it was happening in Ekiti.
So did.
Yeah, but in the Osun State,
Okay.
There was an INEC official that was caught with, a number of a ballot box essentially that was torn, and he's actually being prosecuted. So INEC is doing something. And even before that, sorry, apologies, ballot papers. And even before that, there was, a huge enforcement of the fact that if you are caught, you are prosecuted for a year and you have 100,000 naira as a fine, and if you violate the secrecy, it's 500,000 naira with an extended prison sentence. So it is being enforced when people are being caught doing it. Now, the issue of vote buying in itself is two things, main things: poverty of the mind and education, and that's all it boils down to essentially, because you cannot persuade somebody that's well educated and literate enough that I'll give you 5,000 naira and you will vote for me.
And it's not materially poor.
And it's not materially poor, exactly.
I hear what you're saying. You can't persuade somebody who is educated and materially well off. However, if we look at those who are participating in this, especially given the situation you just described, sir, Kayode, let me come to you. Surely that would influence, regardless of who you are, to still take the money and still act contrary.
I think we need to look at where we're coming from. How did we arrive at vote buying? We didn't have vote buying in the past. Why didn't we have vote buying in the past? Because politicians are able to arrogate numbers to themselves. In Kano, you can arrogate 2 million where you're strong. In Rivers State, you can allocate 1.5 million to your candidate. But now we've improved on our system. The introduction of the PVC,
card reader
gives power back to the voters. So politicians now need to empower those voters one way or the other to be able to get their votes. So it's an improvement. But what we now need to stop is voters commercializing their rights and their right to choose and their civic duties.
Right.
So, and things are being done. We're not getting there yet, but we're making a big step. The fact that we're tidying up our electoral process to the point where in Osun State now there's a rerun with a sitting ruling government is an improvement. When you take away poverty, you're able to reduce the influence of politicians.
I hear what you're saying, things are being done and all of that. But are they sufficient for a real deterrent going forward into 2019?
We must be careful, like Kayode has rightly stated, not to look at the negative end of the pendulum. We can see discernible progress being made. Like Kayode said, there was a time when, elections will still be going on and announcement will be made in Abuja. Yeah. Marks, scores are awarded.
Well, we could say the same thing of what just happened in Osun State, because whilst it was happening, there were results on social media and so on.
But INEC came out and said anybody announcing that can be prosecuted.
That is true. That did happen.
That's not fair.
I am not saying
the results of the polling units as witnessed by those who watched it unofficially released. However, the official result was pronounced by the INEC. Okay. And they also established the fact that a supplementary, I don't like the word rerun. When people say rerun, it's like the whole this thing has been invalidated. A supplementary election will take place, which must be going now, in 7 polling units spanning 4 local government areas.
So the supplementary election is taking place, but this is the same supplementary elections that has raised a lot of questions. Going forward, are we likely to see less of these types of supplementary elections? Because the questions that were being raised was challenging whether or not INEC could do this. And of course, the PDP were saying that they were going to go to court to challenge that. Lakwe, did you, are we likely to see more of these, or this is going to go down, as it were?
I mean, this is not the first time we've seen something like this. We've seen this in Anambra before. And
Bayelsa, Anambra, Kogi, Imo.
We've seen this before. And I think mainly what is happening is we can see it again because the elections seem to be, something that is very, very hot contested for. And specifically in Osun State, I think is becoming a stronghold for the bigger elections that's happening in February. So which is why it's becoming a do or die affair. Now, in answer to your question, I think, yes, we will see more of it. And potentially, if it goes to court, I think, like Kayode rightly said, that, the electoral process is improving. Our democratic process are improving. The use of technology is, making it harder and harder. 453,000 PVCs weren't collected. We can do the maths ourselves. If 1.6 million people registered to vote, 453 weren't collected, and the number of total voters, we can do the mathematics ourselves and see if people if things are being rigged. essentially.
Well, but then, you know, when we do the maths and ourselves, which we have done severally, this would not be the last time, have we been able to do anything about it to bring about change, Kayode?
I think we have, you see, the good thing about this is that people are more conscious. The Nigerian electorate, sometimes we don't give them enough credit. They're becoming more conscious of their power. And what we now need to do is the institutions that run elections, the INEC, the police, the security needs to be trained and empowered more to be impartial in the way they carry out their duties.
Okay.
And I think parties going to court actually strengthens our democracy. Calling into questions even this rerun or this election for today by the PDP is a good thing for our democracy. When you go to the court will give their own interpretation, and then we learn from that lesson and move on.
So, you know, they're voting in Osun State as we speak now. So I'd like to know what we think the likely outcome is going to be. Kayode, let me come to you first on that. I mean, it's been very, very contentious. We've heard, you know, we heard news of persuasions and, you know, enticement and all of that, conversations. But where do we think it's going to go?
It's too close to call. If there's any time you should say too close to call, it is now. And I think this is a lesson to all sitting governors or whoever is in public office. That
Ruling party.
The people would have a say. And you have to put the people first. I'm not saying
Right.
the current person in Osun has not put, but you have to prioritize. So
All right.
it's very close.
It's very close.
Yeah, you can't.
Like, very quickly, what are your thoughts? Who do you think is likely?
I think it could go either way. I think, I mean, at this rate, it'll probably go to APC, but I think it could go either way. It's Nigerian politics. Anything can happen, essentially.
Sabola, where are you at?
The only party that will win now is the party of litigation. And this will get to the fat lady, the Supreme Court.
Supreme Court.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll take a quick break now, but we still have a lot more to discuss. Plus, we'll be joined by the political correspondent, Suleiman Alade. See you in a few moments.
Do you want to join the conversation? Well, you can follow us on Twitter at RealJHUK.
Hello and welcome back to Nigeria Decides. I'm Priscilla Nwikbo and I'm pleased to welcome back our panel. The political analyst and business developer, Bola Oba, the broadcast journalist, Lakwe Banjo, and the commentator and anti-corruption campaigner, Kayode Ogundamisi. And joining us via the internet is the political correspondent, Suleiman Alade, who is going to help us break down the biggest political stories happening in Nigeria this week. Welcome to the program, Suleiman. Now, you've heard us speaking about the Osun election, which is the last major vote. What, if anything can you tell us about the forthcoming presidential elections? Do you think that this vote is going to have any effect?
Absolutely. I think lessons learned from this particular election means that everyone counts. The people are very important, as well as some political leaders. You would see that the moment they said they were going into another election, call it rerun or supplementary election, which is happening today, Thursday, the parties decided to see how they can make, mend fences and move out to speak to those who were once with them. This is time for the political parties, irrespective of whether they are the big ones, to start mending fences. You recall that the former Secretary of Government who pulled out of the APC to become the party flag bearer for the African Democratic Party, Moshood Adeoti, has been approached. He's back as of Wednesday, back to the APC. He was able to poll on his own almost 50,000 votes. That means a big loss for the ruling APC. So they saw the need for them to mend fences, which they did, even though they also tried to reach out to some other members of another political party to see how that can work for them. So leading up to 2019, from the two major political parties, the PDP and the APC, the lessons from Osun is that everyone is important and time for fence mending is now.
Okay, I hear you saying everybody is important out in Osun, but we also have, in this time more than ever, a lot more other people in the race that would not normally be in the race. Are they likely to get a foot in? given, I mean, we spoke with Osun State, the situation is because it's familiarity, is it not, that has made it feasible and possible for that to happen. We have a lot of new faces. Are they likely to have the same impact, if any at all?
I think what that tells us is one thing. There's hope, there's confidence in the system. A lot of day by day, Nigerians are getting to trust the system, and they just know that someday it will swing their way and that their vote will count. Time was when the only thing for anyone to do is to key into any of the two big major political parties. Now, looking at Osun, we have 48 parties going into that race. Whether you call them the pretenders and the contenders, but these people have hope, and going by the result, you see that pretty much they matter to the people.
Okay, Lakwe, I know that you were, nodding your head there. What were those thoughts running through your mind?
I think it's I completely agree with Suleiman here, because I think with Osun, as I said earlier, it is a stronghold for the general election in February. And I think a lot of the things that have characterized these elections, like we mentioned earlier, vote buying, and we've talked about a lot of, all the internal conflict. I mean, the fact that there's players now that would have never been a part of it and now holding the balance of power remains something that makes this election very, very interesting. So I'm interested to see what the outcome would be.
Okay. Suleiman, coming back to you, recently the National Assemblies, they've extended their recess a further 2 weeks due to the primaries. How will this affect NAS going forward and, everything else that is happening in Nigeria? Because we're quite literally coming into the campaign cycle, aren't we?
Well, the National Assembly members, some of them may pretty much not much like what I'm about to say. The number of times they go on recess and the frequency with which they move some of their resumption means one thing to Nigerians, that after all, we can as well do this on a part-time basis instead of running the National Assembly on a full-time basis. So I think until they return, Nigerians, I think, wouldn't be missing pretty much of activities from that institution.
But Suleiman, I thought they were running part-time anyway, because practically they work like 6 months a year when you put all the timings that they sit together, is it not?
Well, that's by your calculation, but again, on papers and in action, it is full-time they're running.
Okay, and I know that we had an issue this week, the whole Skybank situation and Polaris, and Skybank has had their license revoked and this, by the CBN. How significant is this? Because I know that they almost immediately handed over to what we now know to be Polaris, issues about registration. They're now finally registered and being issued with a license. Does this have any significance at all within the banking industry and the economy as a whole?
Well, I think, let's say we are excited and happy about what is happening because investors and depositors haven't lost their money, as assured by the bank and by Nigerians. By the CBN. But before we went on live, I personally put a call across to the Director of Media Corporate Services for the Central Bank of Nigeria. And he said to me that Polaris Bank, as it stands now, is still a bridge bank, as against what a lot of people are saying, that it is a fully fledged bank. Mr. Isaac Okorafor said to me that it is still a bridge bank. And what the CBN is looking for, they're looking for formidable investors who will buy into this bank and actually take off. So for now, investors' money, according to him, they're all safe. The assets, Polaris is looking to take them up. But again, it's still a bridge bank. So the whole talk making the rounds as if everything is all done and dusted isn't true at all. Because what Mr. Okorafor said to me is that they're still hunting for investors. It then means that we're likely to see Polaris Bank come in as a fully, fledged bank with a stronger asset base and perhaps a happier customers.
Okay. What else? Just before I come back to you there, I know that Bola wants to contribute to this particular issue of Polaris and Skybank. Go ahead, sir.
One important fact must be clarified, and that is the former investors, the former owners, have lost everything they have in Skybank. Only customers are protected by the central bank and the other institutions of Nigeria. That must be well stated. So if you're telling me that investors, these funds, customers who put their monies in accounts are not investors. Those who used to own the bank
are the ones who were the investors.
And they've lost everything according to the pronouncement of the central bank.
So then why would this attract new investors?
Oh, naturally, because we're talking about a financial institution to start with, and a financial institution that has an asset that is worth killing for. When Dr. Goodluck Ebele Jonathan was the president,
right,
a cronyistic mechanism was used to make Skybank buy a fantastic asset that has now improved in his lot. That is MTEL. And you know what? If you buy Skybank now, there's a Yoruba proverb that says...
So then why was it, if that's the case, why was it that if those assets are there and they exist, why was it that those who invested their monies still lost their monies?
The politics of...
It's about the politics.
That's the politics of political economy or economy of politics.
But I want to know more about the bridge. Sorry, I want to know about the bridge states, because former Bank PHB, now Keystone Bank, is also a bridge bank, but nobody's bought into it. Why?
Well, you know, Suleiman, perhaps you can help us with that. Bank PHB, once upon a time Bank PHB, now Keystone Bank, and has been Keystone Bank for a few years running. We're still looking for investors there. How are we sure that we're not going to have the same situation with Polaris and Sky?
Well, I think I'll still go back to what Mr. Okurafa said to me from the way he sounded. I think they're upbeat about getting investors. But very quickly, to react to what was Mr. Gbolaoba did say, I think one thing that we should be concerned about is about the recklessness, if there are any, established by the owners. Because as it is now, the EFCC is also asking questions of the owners, saying pretty much that the bank led by the defunct Sky Bank led by Dr. Tunde Ayeni, they have a case to answer. So investigations are still on. Too early for us to say what exactly went wrong.
So are there any other news any other things that are making the news in Nigeria this week?
Of course, the big one is about Lagos State. Tomorrow, on Saturday, Lagos State will be going into the primaries, and the governor, Akinwumi Ambode, has said that he's ready to go through the direct primaries. Don't forget that there's been news making the rounds that the party and some party leaders don't want him, and while some others are saying they want him to continue what exactly he's doing at the moment. So Nigerians can't wait to see how this direct primary will play out on this weekend.
Very interesting. Suleiman, stay with us. Well, we're going to take a quick break now, but we still have a lot more to discuss. So join us in a few moments.
Do you want to join the conversation? Well, you can follow us on Twitter at RealJHUK.
Hello and welcome back to Nigeria Decides. For those of you who do not know, October the 1st is Nigeria's 58th Independence Day. The Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, said that we have chosen to say that our history will not determine our future, and that our history is the least that we can ever be. He went on to say, we have not always excelled or have not always done as well as we should. But that is not the story. The story is that we have never lacked the courage and the will to keep trying, and to do so with greater resolve and greater commitment. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you think he was trying to say in that statement? Because I have to say that I read it a few times over, and I was thinking, okay, what exactly is he trying to tell us here? Let me come to you first, Lakwe.
Oh, in my opinion, I think it was a very inspirational way ahead of the Independence Day on Sunday. And I think for me, it was more to show that our people are resilient. Nigerians are resilient, whatever we've been through in the past, you know, from pre-colonial times, during all the coups and the civilian governments and so on, and even the military government, that we have been resilient. We've always overcome, and we've always, you know, struggled to go on. And in the nicest way possible, I think he's trying to say that, you know, we need to turn our potential into actuality in the near future.
We've always talked about our resilience. We've always talked about how strong we are and how wonderful. But is the 58th independence and the celebrations, the preparations are going on. But truly, Kayode, let me come to you. What do you think he was trying to say there? And in, you know, in relation to the response that we got from Lokwe on this?
Well, you know, he's a pastor, it was probably spirit-led, and pastors speak in parables.
Spirit-led.
So, well, what I would say is that it's wrong. We have to look at our history, both the positive and the negative side, and learn from it. If we don't look back at our history, what we've done wrong, how we became a nation, so-called nation, how we try to...
Why did you say so-called in inverted commas?
Well, so-called because we still have the national question. We have ethnic nationalities who make up Nigeria, questioning their Nigerianness. Do they feel comfortable being an Igbo man in the north, or an Hausa man in the east, or a Yoruba man in the west, outside the west? So we need to question that. We need to listen to people. We need to listen to agitations. People refer to the negative side of our past and learn from those mistakes. Or we could do better, but we can't do better if we don't go back and look back.
And look at the past. Yeah. Suleiman, let me come to you. What did you think about his statements? Do you agree with his sentiments?
Absolutely. I'm just privileged to have run into, had a sneak peek into a big commercial that will be coming out after the independence. And it's about the resilience and the never die spirit of Nigerians. And if you ask me, I think it's better for us to keep highlighting that, because now we're getting to hear a lot of people going into depression. Once upon a time, it wasn't part of our daily living, getting to hear people being depressed and people taking their lives. So I think now that we're highlighting how much we can actually stay together, bring ourselves together and pull this up together as we move into our 58th independence anniversary, it's very, very key and important. But again, in all of that, it then means one thing: we're still, you know, going in circles in some sectors, but I think there's been some relative improvement in some other sectors of our national life.
Okay, just pause there for me for a moment. Well, let me come to you. How far has Nigeria come over the last 58 years? I mean, after all, we are in our longest period of democracy that we've ever had as a country, as it were. But how far do you think we've come?
I'm one who believes a lot in Nigeria.
Right.
Not so much in the political agenda of the political class, but in the inherent resilience of the average Nigerian. And I'm one who believes that take away the malaise that we have in the Northeast, Nigeria is still one of Africa's best story. You know, security issues are there. There are issues appertaining productivity, employment, and whatever. But if you look at how people on a nano basis, individuals.
Let me ask you this. You say it's one of Africa's best stories. Is it one of Africa's best stories?
Ostensibly, it's Africa's biggest economy.
The economy is on one side. I want to speak more in relation to Nigerians on the streets of Nigeria, whether they're in the north, the south, the east, or west, or the central. So tell me, how would they write the story of Nigeria? Would they see it in the same light as you say that is the best African story?
For the many who are disillusioned, it's a frustrating story. But you know what? Nigerians are that species of Homo sapiens who will still wake up believing that before the end of today, they will become billionaires.
Is it just becoming billionaires, or?
That's the irony. Either through a relations who is in government, either through what they think, an opportunity they believe they've seen. Look, the tapestry is very variegated. But you know what? We have a society that may be at the edge of a precipice, but with good political leadership, we have a power.
Kayode, you're smiling because is it that you're confused by what he's saying?
No, I'm a realist, and that's because I make it a point of duty to visit the nook and crannies of Nigeria. And if you really want to feel Nigeria, stay away from the capital, go into the local areas. And yes, we want to be positive, we want to sound positive. But if you go to the Northeast and see those IDPs in those camps that can't go back to their homes, you think we can do better than this. We can't keep 2 million people permanently in a camp with children. And if you look at even our women, they can't give birth. you know, safely. It should be worrying for a country like ours in 2018. If you look at the agitations across our land, with people not having a sense of belonging, across all political parties, across all religious line, gender line, we have failed as a people. But yes, we need those words to sort of inspire us.
We have failed. The leadership has failed.
The leadership did not come from the moon.
The leadership is failing because the people are failing.
And lastly, let me say, you don't take hope to the market.
Well, I think so, because you see, the leadership exists because the people allow that leadership to exist. We can't ignore that. But let me come back to Lagos. Suleiman, you know, you're listening to what we're saying here. We've rested on the point that, you know, there's a leadership failure. We are on our 58th anniversary. Going forward, is this a singular problem of
leadership failure?
Is this a singular problem of leadership failure, or is it fair to say that this is a leadership failure that is helped by the people?
Well, anyway, I think I'll first of all put it on leadership over the years. And again, but if you take a cursory look at the people, they also have their own bit and piece of the blame. Even the artisan, how you interact with the artisan on a daily basis, what he thinks he's going to do to you. Take, for instance, the talk about fighting corruption. I think it starts from your daily living with the people around your neighborhood. So it tells you that the people have a mindset that this is an opportunity for them to get their own. So when we talk about national cake, the word itself, that phrase itself, national cake, is enmeshed in corruption. And that is why a lot of people still would tell you that they want their own people, they want their daughters, their sons, and their children somewhere. But I think Nigerians are getting to see what is going to happen in the days ahead. We have a lot of new faces coming into the fray as we move towards 2019. They may not get the ticket, but if they stay put and continue as the awareness keeps creeping on the people, someday I think we'll have that change. And that change definitely is mind-blowing for a lot of Nigerians.
Thank you very much, Suleiman. I appreciate that.
I really want to chip something in, please.
Quickly, please.
You see, we may be making a major mistake here. It's easy to point accusing finger at the political leadership, but we must realize that we are indeed the organic leadership. And you see, in any polity where the leadership takes liberty to accuse the citizenry, it shows that the leadership is lacking ideas. Okay. I'm one who believes that with the right leadership, be it public or private, Nigerians are amenable to being led to be great. Okay. I've done it in the last 10 years. I know it works. Okay. I've seen youngsters who will come to me and learn a trade and end up in...
He has suddenly woken up. Like, wait, I need to come to you because time doesn't permit me. Very quickly, your last word on this.
God will forgive you.
Amen. Your last word on this. 58 years later, with all that we have said, are we likely to make those real changes necessary for those that Kayode described?
I think a lot of the times what we say about Nigeria is that we're potentially this and we're potentially that. When are we going to get to that actual point? And I think that's something for all of us to take away today. And I do agree with you that it starts with the people, because I mean, if the people do not allow bad leadership for so long, then, you know, we need a revolution, essentially. Yeah, we do. Across Africa, and especially in Nigeria, we do need a revolution.
Well, that's all that we have time for in this edition of Nigeria Decides. Don't forget to join us at RealJHUK on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm Priscilla Winkle, and from the entire team here, still in somewhat sunny London, it's goodbye, and see you next time on Nigeria Decides.